If you dare to explore the darkest mysteries, subscribe now to Whispers in the Dark. Activate notifications and be prepared to hear whispers that may haunt you even in the silence of the night. Real stories, mysterious events, and spine-chilling tales. But beware, fear will always be your companion here. Click the subscribe button before it's too late. Party Intruder. It was supposed to be a simple party, just a small group of friends hanging out while my parents were out of town. Nothing crazy. My best friend, Jake, convinced me it would be fine. "We'll keep it downstairs," he said. "No one's going to trash the place." So, we moved anything breakable to the basement, locked all the doors upstairs, and even taped a big off-limits sign at the bottom of the stairs. For the first few hours, everything went smoothly. People were drinking, laughing, and playing music, and for once, I felt like I'd actually pulled off a decent party. But then, around midnight, I noticed Jake staring up at the staircase with this weird look on his face. At first, I thought he was just zoning out, maybe tipsy from the beer. But when I followed his gaze, I froze. The sign was ripped off, crumpled on the floor, and the faint sound of creaking floorboards came from upstairs. My stomach dropped. No one was supposed to be up there. I grabbed Jake's arm and whispered, "Who the hell went up?" He didn't answer, just kept staring at the stairs. Then, without saying anything, he started walking toward them. I tried to stop him. I really didn't want to go up there, but he just whispered back, "What if someone's messing with your parents' stuff?" That was all it took. Against my better judgment, I followed him up, my heart pounding with every step. The second we reached the top, it was clear something was off. The door to my parents' bedroom, which I was sure I'd locked, was ajar. A faint light spilled out into the hallway, flickering slightly like it was coming from a flashlight. Jake turned to me, his face pale, and mouthed, "Do you hear that?" I strained to listen and picked up a faint rustling sound, drawers opening, papers being shuffled through. My heart felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I wanted to run back downstairs, pretend I hadn't seen or heard anything, but Jake was already moving toward the door. When he pushed it open, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There was a guy in there, completely dressed in black, with a ski mask covering his face. He had a gun tucked into the back of his pants and was rifling through my dad's dresser. For a second, I thought maybe it was some kind of prank, someone from the party trying to freak us out. But the moment he saw us, he froze, and the look in his eyes told me this was not a joke. Jake muttered, "What the F?" But before he could finish, the guy grabbed the gun and pointed it right at us. Neither of us moved. I couldn't even breathe. The guy didn't say anything at first, just kept the gun aimed at us while he backed toward the window. Jake raised his hand slowly, and I did the same, trying to show we weren't a threat. I wanted to scream or run, but my legs felt like lead. The guy finally broke the silence with this low, angry voice. "Stay there. Don't follow me." Then he turned, yanked open the window, and started climbing out. I don't even know how he managed to do it while holding the gun, but he was gone in seconds. I rushed to the window and saw him drop down to the lawn and disappear into the woods behind our house. Jake and I just stood there for what felt like an eternity, too stunned to speak. My hands were shaking so bad I had to grab the edge of the dresser to steady myself. "We should call the cops," I finally whispered. But Jake shook his head. "Are you crazy? Half the people downstairs are underage and drunk. They'll shut the whole thing down." I wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. So instead, we went back downstairs, trying to act like nothing had happened. The party kept going, the music blaring, people oblivious to the fact that an armed stranger had just been in the house. The rest of the party felt like a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about the guy, his eyes glaring at us from behind the mask, the gun in his hand. Every time I heard a loud laugh or the door opening downstairs, I jumped, half convinced he'd come back. Jake tried to act normal, but I could tell he was just as rattled. At one point, he grabbed a beer and downed it in one go, something he never did. Meanwhile, I kept sneaking glances toward the staircase, expecting to see him standing there, watching us. The fact that no one else knew made it worse, like we were the only ones carrying this secret. When the last few people finally left, the house felt eerily quiet. We walked through every room downstairs, locking windows, double-checking doors. Then, against my better judgment, we went back upstairs to check my parents' room. The dresser drawers were still open, papers scattered everywhere. Nothing seemed to be missing at first, but then I noticed my mom's jewelry box was gone. Jake found one of my dad's watches tossed on the floor, like the guy had dropped it while he was rushing out. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just some drunk guest sneaking around. He'd been here for a reason. I barely slept that night. Every creak, every rustle of the wind outside felt like the guy coming back. Jake crashed on the couch downstairs, saying he'd keep watch, but I could tell it was more about not wanting to be alone. When the sun came up, I finally worked up the courage to clean the mess in my parents' room. It felt wrong, like I was wiping away evidence, but what else could I do? I found a few scuff marks near the window where he'd climbed out and a dirty handprint smudged on the windowsill. My stomach churned just thinking about how close we'd been to getting hurt, or worse. The weirdest part came later, though. I decided to check the front door camera, hoping to get a look at the guy's face or at least how he got in. But when I pulled up the footage, I couldn't find anything. There were no recordings of him arriving, no sign of him sneaking in. The last clip showed the first guests arriving at the party, and then, nothing. The system had gone offline for hours and only started recording again after everyone had left. It didn't make any sense. How did he know the cameras were there? How did he get in without setting off the alarms? I felt this deep, gut-wrenching unease like we'd been watched for longer than we realized. Jake and I decided to keep it quiet. We didn't tell my parents, didn't tell anyone who came to the party. What were we supposed to say? Oh hey, by the way, there was a guy with a gun in the house last night. It felt too insane to explain without getting into trouble ourselves. But even after we cleaned everything up and put the dresser back in order, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't in the clear. The handprint on the windowsill stuck in my head. I'd wiped it away, but I could still picture it, smeared and smudged like a ghostly signature. It was like the guy had left a mark, something invisible that wouldn't go away. A week later, when my parents got back, my mom noticed the missing jewelry box almost immediately. "Where is it?" she asked, holding the empty space on her dresser. I froze, stammering some excuse about maybe she'd moved it before they left. She didn't buy it but let it drop. That night, I heard her whispering to my dad about how the house felt different, like someone had been here. I didn't tell her she was right. Even now, months later, I keep thinking about that guy's face, or what little I could see of it. Sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear the creak of those same floorboards upstairs. And every time, I wonder if we made a mistake not calling the cops that night. I thought I'd eventually forget about it, move on, but it stuck with me in ways I didn't expect. Every time I hear a strange noise at night, my mind goes straight back to that moment. The creak of the stairs, the flashlight beam in the dark, the way the guy's eyes locked on us. I still haven't told anyone else about what happened, not even Jake anymore. He's tried to brush it off, saying stuff like, "It's not like we got hurt," but I can tell he's just as haunted by it. Sometimes, he'll casually bring up security systems or how easy it is for people to break into houses, like he's testing the waters to talk about it again. The thing that gets me the most, though, is wondering if he's still out there. The guy knew what he was doing. He got in and out without a trace, even shut off the cameras somehow. Was he watching us the whole time? Did he see me hosting the party and think I'd be an easy target? I'll never know. All I do know is that every so often, when I'm alone in the house, I'll catch myself staring at the window he climbed out of. And for just a split second, I swear I can see his shadow there, waiting. The ghostly basketball. I'll never forget that night in the gym. It was late, probably around 11 p.m., and I'd gone there because I couldn't sleep. The place was pitch black except for the dim emergency lights near the exits. The silence was almost oppressive, except for the occasional creak of the old wooden floor. I just wanted to shoot a few hoops, clear my head before trying to crash again. But when I walked in, the basketball was already on the court, rolling slowly toward the center. I froze. At first, I thought maybe someone had been there before me and left it, but it was the way the ball moved. It wasn't natural. It didn't wobble or lose momentum like it should have. It just kept rolling in a perfectly straight line until it stopped dead in the center circle, as if placed there. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself I was overthinking it. I mean, it's just a ball, right? But the air felt wrong. It wasn't cold exactly, but there was this heaviness, like I was being watched. I grabbed the ball, dribbled a few times, and took a shot. The sound of the ball hitting the rim echoed through the empty gym, and for a second, everything felt normal. Then I heard it, the sound of footsteps coming from the upper level, where the viewing area was. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone was pacing. My stomach dropped. No one was supposed to be up there, and I hadn't seen anyone come in. I called out, "Hello? Who's there?" My voice sounded tiny, swallowed by the massive space. The footsteps stopped. I stood there, clutching the basketball, straining my ears for any other sound. Nothing. Just the faint hum of the emergency lights and my own breathing, which was getting faster by the second. I told myself it was probably one of the night janitors or maybe another student sneaking around. Still, my hands were shaking. I decided to walk toward the stairs leading up to the upper level. The idea of someone watching me from the shadows was worse than confronting whoever, or whatever, was up there. As I climbed, each step felt like it echoed louder than the last, like the entire building was amplifying the sound. By the time I reached the top, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The upper level was darker than the court below, and I couldn't see much past the railing that overlooked the gym. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed movement. There, near the far end, stood a girl. At least, I think it was a girl. She looked young, maybe around my age, with long hair and a white dress that seemed to almost glow in the dim light. She was facing away from me, completely still. I felt rooted to the spot, unable to move or speak. Something about her felt wrong. Not just because she appeared out of nowhere, but because there was this unnatural stiffness to the way she stood. I opened my mouth to say something, but before I could, she turned her head just slightly, like she knew I was there all along. The way she turned her head, it wasn't normal. It was slow, almost mechanical, like a doll being wound around. I could barely see her face, but what I did catch sent chills down my spine. Her eyes looked empty, hollow, like they didn't belong to a living person. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't cooperate. Instead, I just stood there, frozen, clutching the railing like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. She tilted her head slightly, and I swear I heard the faintest creak, like bones shifting. Then, out of nowhere, she let out a scream. Not a normal scream, though. It was high-pitched, piercing, and so loud it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. My knees buckled, and I dropped to the floor, covering my ears. I don't know how long I stayed like that, but when I finally dared to look up, she was gone. The space where she'd been was completely empty, like she'd never been there at all. But something else caught my attention. Movement down on the court. The basketball was rolling again, but this time it wasn't just moving randomly. It was circling the court over and over, picking up speed. I scrambled to my feet, half expecting to see her down there, but the court was empty. The ball, though, kept moving faster and faster, until it slammed into the far wall with a force that made the whole gym shake. That was it for me. I bolted down the stairs, not even bothering to grab my bag. As I ran for the exit, I swear I heard that scream again, echoing faintly behind me. I burst out of the gym doors, gulping the cold night air like I'd been drowning. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely shove them into my hoodie pockets. The campus was eerily quiet, with only the faint hum of the streetlights breaking the silence. For a second, I thought about heading straight to the dorms and pretending this never happened. But curiosity, or stupidity, got the better of me. I turned back to look at the gym. The windows on the upper level were dark, just like they should have been, but something caught my eye. In one of them, I saw the faint outline of a figure. It was her. She was standing there, still as a statue, staring straight at me. My stomach flipped. I didn't even wait to see if she moved. I turned and ran as fast as I could. Back in my dorm, I locked the door and slid down onto the floor, trying to catch my breath. My roommate wasn't there. He must have been pulling an all-nighter in the library, which made the room feel too quiet. Every little sound made me jump. The faint creak of the floorboards, the hum of the heater, even the rustle of my bed sheets. I kept replaying what I'd seen in my head, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. Maybe I was just tired, and my brain was playing tricks on me. But then I remembered the scream, the way it seemed to pierce straight through me. No matter how much I tried to rationalize it, I couldn't explain the basketball, the way it moved on its own, or how she disappeared without a trace. Even now, thinking about it makes my skin crawl. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear the scream again, like it was looping in my brain. Around 3 a.m., I finally gave up and turned on my desk lamp, hoping the light would make me feel less on edge. I grabbed my phone to distract myself and started scrolling aimlessly, but my hands were still shaking. Then, out of nowhere, I got this overwhelming feeling that I wasn't alone. You know that sensation when someone's standing too close behind you? That's exactly what it felt like. I glanced at the mirror across from my bed, half expecting to see someone there. But it was just me, looking pale and freaked out. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling, so I turned the mirror to face the wall. It didn't help much. The next morning, I tried to tell one of my friends about what happened, but I couldn't bring myself to go into detail. I just said I'd had a weird experience in the gym and left it at that. He laughed it off and said the place was creepy at night, but I could tell he didn't take me seriously. For the rest of the day, I couldn't focus on anything. Every time I passed the gym on my way to class, I'd get this tight feeling in my chest, like I was being drawn to it, but at the same time, I wanted to stay as far away as possible. I didn't go back in there after that night, not for weeks. But what haunts me the most is how real it all felt. I can't explain it, but I know what I saw, and I know I'll never forget her. Even now, months later, I still catch myself thinking about her. Sometimes when I'm lying in bed, I'll replay that scream in my head and get this uneasy feeling, like she's still out there somewhere, watching. I haven't told anyone else the full story. It just feels too ridiculous. Who would believe me? A ghostly girl, a moving basketball, a scream that made my whole body feel like it was vibrating? It sounds like something out of a bad horror movie, but I swear it happened. I've tried looking up the school's history to see if there was ever an incident, maybe a student who died or something, but I couldn't find anything. It's almost like whatever I experienced wasn't tied to the school at all, but to me. Sometimes late at night, I'll hear something, like a faint thud or the sound of a ball bouncing, and my heart will race until I realize it's just my imagination. At least, I think it is. I haven't been back to the gym at night since that happened, and honestly, I don't plan to. There's a part of me that's still curious, that wants answers, but a bigger part of me knows I'll never get them. Whatever I saw, or whoever she was, she's out of my life now. At least, I hope she is. But if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that I'll never look at an empty basketball court the same way again. The impostor foreign exchange student. I don't even know how to start this without sounding completely insane, but here it goes. Back in high school, we had this Romanian exchange student who joined my class halfway through junior year. His name was Adrian, and at first, he seemed pretty normal. Well, as normal as a guy with a thick accent and an oddly formal way of talking could be. He was polite, a bit reserved, but always smiling. Teachers loved him because he was quiet and well-mannered, and honestly, most of the students didn't pay him much attention. I wouldn't have either if it weren't for this one group project we got paired up for in history class. That's when things started feeling off. Adrian was smart, almost too smart. Like, he knew way more about European history than our teacher did, which was impressive but also kind of intimidating. What really stuck out, though, was how he talked about Romania. Anytime someone asked him about his hometown or his family, he'd get weirdly vague. He'd say things like, "It's a small village, very boring," and then change the subject. At first, I thought he just didn't want to share personal stuff, which, fair enough. But as we worked on the project, I started noticing these little inconsistencies. He mentioned his parents once but said "my guardian" another time. And one day, when he showed me a picture of his sister, he quickly snatched it back like he'd made a mistake. Something about him didn't sit right with me, but I figured I was just overthinking it. Things got weirder after that. Adrian started hanging out with this senior named Jake, who wasn't exactly known for being a great influence. Jake was into all kinds of sketchy stuff, parties, fake IDs, even some rumors about credit card scams. Seeing Adrian with him felt so out of place. He'd gone from being this shy, polite guy to tagging along with someone who probably wouldn't pass a background check. I asked him about it once, jokingly, like, "Did Jake recruit you into his mafia or something?" He laughed it off, but there was this flicker of something in his eyes. Panic, maybe? I couldn't tell. He said, "Jake is just helping me learn American culture," and then changed the subject again, like always. Then came the night of the Halloween party. Jake had thrown it at some abandoned house on the edge of town, and everyone showed up, including Adrian. I almost didn't recognize him. He was dressed sharp, wearing this suit that looked expensive, and he carried himself like he was someone important. The shy exchange student act was completely gone. I didn't stay long. I'm not into parties, but I did see something that made my stomach drop. I watched Adrian pull Jake aside into a corner and hand him something small and shiny. It looked like a credit card reader, the kind cashiers use at stores. Jake grinned and tucked it into his jacket like it was no big deal. I didn't say anything, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Adrian wasn't who he said he was. About a week after the party, things started unraveling fast. Jake was arrested. Word got around that he'd been caught trying to pull off some credit card scam at a gas station, and when the cops searched his car, they found a bunch of fake IDs and stolen credit card numbers. That wasn't even the craziest part. Rumor had it that Jake told the police everything, including that he wasn't working alone. He named Adrian as his partner. I didn't believe it at first. I mean, how could the quiet, polite exchange student be involved in something like that? But then Adrian stopped showing up to school. Our history teacher said Adrian had family issues and had to leave town suddenly, but it didn't add up. No one from the foreign exchange program seemed to know where he went, and the whole situation just felt off. A few days later, the truth came out. Adrian wasn't Adrian at all. The police showed up at school to question some of us who had worked closely with him, and that's when they dropped the bomb. The real Adrian, the actual Romanian exchange student, had never even made it to the US. The guy we'd been calling Adrian was a 25-year-old criminal who had stolen his identity. He'd forged the paperwork, faked his accent, and even manipulated the exchange program to place him in our school. The news spread through school like wildfire, and everyone had their own version of what happened. Some people said Adrian was part of a bigger crime ring, while others swore he was a lone con artist. What freaked me out the most were the rumors about murder. The cops didn't share much, but apparently they were linking him to a series of violent crimes back in Europe. The whole thing felt surreal. I kept thinking about how normal he seemed when we first met. Sure, he had some quirks, but nothing that screamed dangerous criminal. Then, I started remembering things that didn't make sense at the time but felt terrifying in hindsight. Like how he always avoided pictures. Even when the yearbook staff tried to snap a group photo of our history project, he claimed he was late for something and slipped out. Or how he once mentioned knowing a little about computers, but somehow hacked into the school's Wi-Fi when the network was down. Looking back, it was all so obvious, but in the moment, none of us suspected a thing. The thought that I had worked so closely with someone capable of God knows what sent chills down my spine. A few days later, the whole situation took an even darker turn. The police released more details about the fake Adrian, whose real name was apparently Pavel something. I can't remember the last name, but it was Eastern European. He wasn't just a con artist. He was wanted for murder. They didn't say much, just that he was suspected of killing someone back in Romania before fleeing the country. That's when it really hit me. This guy had been sitting in my class, working on projects with us, laughing at jokes, all while hiding something that dark. I couldn't stop thinking about the picture he showed me of his sister. Who was she really? And why did he panic when I saw it? What really stuck with me, though, was how easily he fooled everyone. He didn't just fake being a high schooler. He blended in. Teachers, students, even parents liked him. I overheard one of my classmates' moms saying she felt bad for him, thinking he was just a misunderstood kid trying to fit in. The truth was, he'd been running a carefully crafted con the whole time. But the scariest part? He didn't just vanish after Jake got arrested. Rumor had it that he slipped out of town before the cops could catch him. They found his dorm empty, with no trace of where he'd gone. It was like he'd never been there at all. For weeks, the whole school felt like it was holding its breath. Nobody knew where Pavel had gone, and the police weren't giving us any updates. Every time I heard about a weird car parked near campus or a stranger around town, my mind went straight to him. Some people thought he'd left the country. Others were convinced he was hiding somewhere close. I couldn't shake this feeling that he wasn't done, like he still had unfinished business here. It sounds paranoid, I know, but once you realize someone you trusted was lying about everything, you start seeing danger in every shadow. The strangest part came about a month later. I was cleaning out my locker when I found an envelope shoved inside. At first, I thought it was just some stupid prank or a note from one of my friends, but when I opened it, my stomach dropped. Inside was the picture Adrian, Pavel, had shown me of his supposed sister. No note, no explanation, just the photo. I felt sick. How did it get there? Had he come back? Was he trying to mess with me? I took it to the principal, but they didn't take it seriously. Probably just a leftover from earlier, they said. But I knew better. That picture hadn't been in my locker before, and I hadn't seen it since the day he showed it to me. After finding that picture, I couldn't sleep for days. I kept imagining Pavel slipping into the school at night, lurking in the halls, planting it in my locker. The photo itself was unnerving too. It wasn't just a casual picture. The girl, his sister, looked tense, like she wasn't comfortable having her picture taken. Her eyes didn't meet the camera, and her smile was forced, almost pained. I couldn't stop wondering who she really was and what had happened to her. It haunted me, but I didn't tell anyone else about it. I was scared they'd think I was overreacting or making it up. Then, one night, I was home alone, trying to focus on homework, when the power went out. At first, I thought it was just a blown fuse. Our house is old, and that kind of thing happens sometimes. But then I noticed something weird. The streetlights outside were still on. It was just our house. My stomach dropped, and I grabbed my phone to call my parents. That's when I heard it, a faint creak from the back door. It wasn't loud, but in the silence of the house, it was unmistakable. I froze, my heart racing. I didn't want to believe it, but the thought hit me like a freight train. What if it was him? I didn't dare move. My phone was in my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to call anyone. I just sat there, straining to hear any other sound. The creak came again, louder this time, like someone testing the door. Slowly, I slid off my chair and crouched behind the dining table, trying to keep out of sight. My brain was racing through every possibility. Could it be Pavel? Was this all in my head? I kept telling myself it was probably just the wind or something, but deep down, I knew better. Something wasn't right. Then I heard the door click open. Not slam or burst open, just a soft, deliberate click, like whoever was there didn't want to be noticed. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I could hear faint footsteps, slow and cautious, coming closer. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I finally forced myself to call 911, whispering as quietly as I could. The operator kept asking me to repeat myself, but I couldn't speak any louder without giving myself away. I just kept saying, "Someone's in my house. Please hurry." The footsteps got closer, and then I heard them stop near the kitchen. My heart was pounding so hard I thought whoever it was might hear it. I pressed myself against the wall, gripping my phone like it was a lifeline. I could hear drawers opening, the faint clatter of silverware. Whoever was there wasn't in a hurry. They were searching for something. The 911 operator was still on the line, trying to keep me calm, but I couldn't focus on her words. All I could think was, what if they find me before the police get here? Suddenly, the sound stopped. No more footsteps, no more drawers, just silence. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl. I didn't dare move. Then I heard the sound of the front door opening and closing. I waited, trembling, for what felt like forever until I finally heard sirens in the distance. When the police arrived, they searched the house but didn't find anyone. The back door was unlocked, and a few things in the kitchen had been moved, but that was it. I told them about Pavel, about the photo in my locker, but they didn't seem convinced it was connected. Could have been a random break-in, one officer said, like that was supposed to make me feel better. But I knew it wasn't random. That night was the last time I ever heard anything about Pavel. He disappeared completely. No arrests, no sightings, nothing. To this day, I don't know why he came back or what he was looking for. Maybe it was a warning, maybe something worse. All I know is, I still can't shake the feeling that he's out there somewhere, watching and waiting.